Welcome to Ocean 5. I'm so glad that all of you came out and are curious about sharks. I'm sure we will learn and have fun, and I have to say that I'm just so thrilled to see all of your lovely faces that are not hiding behind the screen. This is our first in-person Cocktails and Fishtales in 3 years. So, cheers to that. If at any time you need a refill on your drink, you need to use the facilities, please feel welcome to do that. Come and go as you wish. Get comfortable. We do have some show and tell items that I will be passing around, so I'll make sure it gets to both sides, and you should be able to see the presentation from anywhere. But if you need to move to a better viewing spot, feel free and comfortable to do that. So just a couple quick announcements before we get rolling. Thank you to Ocean 5 for being our host here. We're so delighted to have a space like this within Gig Harbor that is as welcoming and as sustainably minded as Harbor WildWatch is. So we are so lucky. If you've never been here before, do take the time after our presentation today, wander around downstairs, read up about all the amazing, fun, and cool things about this facility. It is truly a treasure, and we're happy to have it here. I'll get to that in a second. Hopefully you are familiar with Harbor WildWatch and who Harbor WildWatch is. We are a nonprofit group. Our mission is to inspire stewardship, and we do that through different educational opportunities like this presentation. If you've not been to our facility, I would welcome you to come join us downtown. We have a brand new Sharks of the Salish Sea exhibit that opened last week. So come on down. You'll get to see some of the same things here as well as many other fun activities. And we're open from 10 to 4, Wednesday through Saturday. So, on that note, if anybody is looking to volunteer with our organization or support us through our Steward Club membership, we've got 2 volunteers at the back, or not volunteers, 2 interns at the back, Kat and Valeria. Wave your hands around. Woo, woo, woo. Everybody cheer for them because interns deserve all the support that we can give them. They can help you get signed up for the Steward Club or to join our volunteers. We have volunteer training coming up very soon in May, and we're very much looking forward to another in-person training where we'll get to be with you on the beach in person. It's going to be fantastic. If you're not following us already on our social media channels, please do. We are on just about all of them, at least all the ones that matter. And we encourage you, follow us on multiple because the content does change depending on which avenue that you are following us on. So we appreciate that. We also do have a website that you can find more information about Harbor WildWatch's programs and what we have going on. You can also sign up for our newsletter that sends out each week. So I would encourage you to do that as well. Now, without any further ado, I'm going to introduce on the Sharks of Washington. And if you guys thought I was a big nerd when it came to sharks, even more. So I am super excited because I just have all these pressing cool questions and I want to have them answered. But hopefully you will join me in my enthusiasm. Let's welcome up Lisa Hillier. I'm going to take big nerd as a compliment.
Oh, I fully meant it as a compliment.
Yeah.
Big compliment.
Right. I cannot believe the crowd tonight. It is so great to see everybody here. And thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm not used to using a microphone. I'm used to swinging my hands all around, so we're going to see how this goes. So my name is Lisa Hillier, and like she said, I am from the Department of Fish and Wildlife. I have been with the agency for 20 years. I started on the shellfish dive team and spent quite a few years managing sea cucumber and sea urchins, doing abalone research and doing our gooey duck fishery. But for the past 11 years, I have kind of transitioned into groundfish management. So right now, I help manage fisheries for groundfish in the Gulf of Alaska and in the Bering Sea. And then I also sit on the management team for our coastal pelagic species here in the Pacific. So one of my favorite things about my job, when I say groundfish or bottom fish, just so you know, within that complex, sharks are a part of that complex. And sharks are pretty much my favorite groups of fish to work with. And hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll also see that they're going to be your favorites too. So I would apologize to this side of the room. we didn't have enough cords to stretch all the way over here. So I'm going to do my best to make sure that everybody can see everything that I'm holding up. It's going to be really cool, but like Rachel said, it's going to be passed around, so if you can't see that carefully, you can take a closer look when it comes to you. So I think I have about an hour for this presentation. The stuff I have is about 45 minutes long. So if you have questions, please feel free to raise your hand and ask them during the presentation, or we can answer questions at the end. Also, my email address is here, and I have cards in the back. So if you're driving home tonight and that question pops into your head, please reach out to me. I am very happy to answer any questions you have about any of the groundfish species, including sharks or anything else you might have a question about. All right, so with that, let's get going. I have so much to tell you. And the first thing I want to tell you is, what is a shark? Everybody's going to get on the same page, and I am sure there are shark experts in this room. And there are probably people that are like, I don't even know what a shark is. So we're going to get everybody on the same page, and we're going to talk about what is a shark. And then I'm going to tell you how many of them live in Washington State, which might surprise you a little bit. We're going to talk about why they're important, and how my agency specifically monitors their populations and manages them. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to tell you about our changing oceans. You would think this is a good topic, but it's not going to be for our sharks. And then some of the current research that we're doing here in the Puget Sound, and then I'm going to give you some resources so that when you have those questions that I can't answer, we can go to other places and find them. All right, well, they're in a group of elasmobranchs, which means that they're a cartilaginous fish, and cartilage is a lot less dense than bone. Most fish have bony skeletons, but these have cartilage. The earliest known sharks roamed our oceans about 420 million years ago. That's a long time. But the most recent ancestors to the sharks that we have right now are about 100 million years old. Sharks in this category have a true upper and lower jaw, one of the characteristics of a shark, and I'm going to show you a bit more about that when we get into some of the things that I brought. They also have a very unique type of tooth attachment and replacement. Sharks have approximately, depending on species, about 30,000 teeth in their lifetime. And with some of these that I'm going to show you today, you're going to see, when you look at the back of them, that they have so many teeth ready to go. They have teeth that are being used. A shark is always ready to catch that prey item that is coming into its world, because if it didn't have teeth ready to go, it may miss that, and then it could go hungry for months. So they're always ready because they have teeth that are always available. They also, and this is not big news, can only swim forward. Sharks also, many of them, have to keep swimming in order to breathe. So if you'll notice sharks, when you see them swimming around the aquarium or you see pictures of them, their mouths are always open, right? So a lot of sharks have to breathe with something called ram ventilation. So they bring the water in through their mouth and push it over their gills as they swim forward so that they can breathe. Well, some of them can do it when they're at rest, but a lot of them can't. So they have to keep swimming so that the water flows over their gills and they can breathe. They also have internal fertilization, and they have a very large range of how many pups that they can give birth to. And unfortunately, they have a very bad reputation. So I've been with the agency for 20 years, so some of these statistics are old. I don't actually know when this survey was taken. But when you say shark, about 84% of people see this. So this movie led to the killing of tens of thousands of sharks.
Oh, wow.
Even though Peter Benchley, who made the movie, formally came out and apologized for this movie, the damage was done, and he's actually a shark advocate. But the damage was done, and if this seems a little dated for you, let me just tell you that sharks are often characterized as these huge killing machines. Can everybody still hear me?
Yeah.
Put on my teacher voice. Okay. Huge killing machines. And this is really unfortunate because the issue with sharks is actually that they're threatened by us. They're threatened by our activities. They're threatened by overfishing, exploitation of their body parts, especially their fins. They're also prone to us kind of degrading their habitat so that they don't have a good place to eat and feed and reproduce. And sometimes they're just outright slaughtered just because people have fear and they think they're Jaws sharks. They are colorful, and they are unique, and they actually are fairly phenomenal. The smallest shark that we have is about 6.7 centimeters, and then they go all the way up to a 40-foot long shark. So there's a huge range of diversities in these species. The average shark species is 6 foot long, and it weighs less than 30 pounds. And it has never been documented to bite anyone, anywhere, for any reason. In the world, we have over 530 species of sharks.
Wow.
Okay, but how many of those are in Washington State? Anybody got a guess? 2?
40.
40. Oh, I like that optimism. Yeah. What do you think? 1,000. I love it. I wish we had 1,000 sharks. That would be a lot. Well, Washington State is home to no less than 12 species on a very regular basis. But we also have instances where sharks come into our waters just to kind of check it out and see what's happening. So we've had instances of leopard sharks and angel sharks, but these are the sharks that tend to hang out here, and they want to be in our waters, and they want to be in this habitat. However, that is starting to shift a little bit, so we may see more instances of more species coming into Washington State waters. And when I mean Washington State, I don't only mean just the Puget Sound region or the Salish Sea, but also on our coast. So a lot of these are coastal species because they need the colder water. So between 1837 and today, there have been 2 unprovoked shark attacks in Washington, both in Grace Harbor, both by white sharks, and neither were fatal. So this has been in my presentation for years now, and then one of our scientists in December sent me this tooth. She said, Lisa, we've had a shark fatality, and I need you to verify what species of shark this tooth came from. It was lodged in a shoulder. And I said, oh, okay. Well, it was a fatality, and the poor sea otter died, unfortunately. And the shark that ate the sea otter was actually a white shark, better known as a great white shark, here off of our coast. So we do have these sharks in our water. We've always had these sharks in our waters. You don't hear about them very often because they're doing their shark business and they're eating their shark prey, which can be sea otters. Okay, so I want to tell you a little bit more about each of these sharks. Let's start with the spiny dogfish. One of my favorites. They are so cute. And they are very abundant in Puget Sound. And this is what their jaw set looks like. So you can tell by this shark species that they have adapted to eat a certain type of prey. Their teeth are tiny, and what do you guys think they eat?
Squid.
Yes, squid, little shrimp, small crustacean. What do you think? Crab. They could eat crabs. They might be a little crunchy, a little hard. Yeah, smelt, anchovies, herring. So I'm going to pass my samples around. There's 2 rules. 1, please don't get your blood on them. So all the teeth are very, very sharp, even though they're dead. So no blood, and please don't put them over your head. Only so these are dogfish. They have one of the longest gestation periods of pretty much any vertebrate in the world. They're pregnant for 2 years, 24 months. There are a couple animals that are pregnant longer than them. One is another shark. The frilled shark is pregnant for 42 months, and the alpine salamander is pregnant for 48 months. Sounds terrible to me. It's pregnant for longer than an elephant, which is 21 months. And spiny dogfish, they tend to have between 2 and 12 pups, and the average is about 6. So they carry their babies for a very long time, and they don't give birth to very many. All right, our next shark that we have is a blue shark. Blue sharks are pretty cool. They go to all of our oceans, except for they don't go up into our polar regions, because fish are the same temperature as their surrounding water in general. I'm going to give you some exceptions here in a few minutes. But when you get really cold, it's hard to swim really fast, so they do not tend to go up into the polar oceans. These are often caught when people are fishing for salmon and tuna off the coast. They tend to hang out with tuna schools. And you can see an adaptation in their teeth. So the jaw set that I passed around earlier, they have little teeny tiny teeth. And you can see that these teeth go backwards. And this is because they're trying to catch a fish that is strong, and they don't want that fish to escape. So their adaptation is to hold the fish in once it goes in. If you stick your hand in this, it will hurt. So no blood. But some of these adaptations are really quite amazing for these fish that are sold. Also, if you turn these samples around, you can see, when I told you they have 30,000 teeth in their lifetime, all the rows and rows and rows of teeth that are there and ready to be available if they were to break teeth or lose teeth. Blue sharks are there to have those. All right, our next species that's very prevalent here in Washington State, and one of the fastest shark species out there, is the short-fin mako. So just so you know, all of our samples came from fish that either died naturally on beaches. One was a state record, one was dumped, but we don't go out and kill these sharks. This is simply, we are using these for outreach and education. We didn't kill any of these sharks for you to see today. So this was a short-fin mako that was stranded off the coast. These also hunt really fast fish. You can see that by the adaptations in their teeth. And something surprising is this is one of those fish that can regulate its body temperature. There's a couple of them. The salmon shark can do it as well. So they can bring their body temperature higher than the surrounding water, which gives them the ability to track fish into colder waters and live in different areas. They can follow salmon runs, they can follow their prey species up into colder waters. So this is a short-fin mako. And there is hand sanitizer if there's a lot of touching of things that you're uncomfortable with, so please feel free to use that. All right, so now is one of my favorite fish. And this fish was caught by a harvester off the coast, and they decided to dump this fish. And this is called a thresher shark. This is the tail of a thresher shark. Yeah. It's very heavy, and it dried out in my garage for about 4 months.
Wow.
This fish is adapted to have a different strategy to catch its prey. It uses a tail like a whip, a little bit like Indiana Jones, whips and stuns the fish, and then while the fish are stunned, it consumes it. It has little teeny tiny teeth, it tends to eat smelt, herring, anchovy, any of the forage fish that are pretty small off the coast that school. Thresher sharks are big predators of schools of little tiny fish. And you can see that in their adaptation for really long tail, really tiny teeth. Doesn't need to hold on to anything, it doesn't need to keep it or catch it, it just needs to eat it once it's done. So, pretty cool adaptation, and a lot of energy that goes into the tail. This last year we had at least 3 thresher sharks wash up on our coast, but we also have a closure on all sardine fisheries because the populations are too low. Correlation, maybe. Okay, so these guys eat bait, and they eat squid and bait fish, which is also called a forage fish. Okay, our next shark, there's a little fake news in there that they could decapitate somebody, but. Okay, so this is a basking shark. This is one of the second largest sharks in the world, and I don't have a jaw set. A, because I've never found one washed up on the beach, and B, because they're planktonic. They don't have teeth, and it would be pretty hard to preserve their jaw set, I think, because they filter plankton out of the water. But historically, they were considered a nuisance, and they were rammed and killed just because they were tangling up in nets. And now we would really love to know if people are seeing them or where they are. We do have a reporting network and a basking sharks hotline from NOAA, or a website that you can go to if you do see a basking shark while you're out fishing, or if somebody sees one. We also have, yeah, that picture didn't show very well, but it's a comparison to people in a kayak to the size of the second largest shark in the world. Suffice to say, they're enormous. Yeah. All right, so our last is the Pacific sleeper shark. They can grow up to 20 feet, and they live for centuries. So sharks, I told you that earlier, they are made out of cartilage, and unlike bone, cartilage is really, really hard to age. A lot of fish will lay down their structures in kind of a ring pattern like a tree. So we use otoliths from fish, which is an ear bone, and we can count all the rings that the fish have laid down over their lifetime. We can do similar things in spines, like the spines of a dogfish or the spines of some of the other animals, fin rays for lingcod, but it's really hard to age cartilage. So we are estimating a lot of ages of sharks, but we've had tagged sharks that have been out there, and they've been out in the ocean for decades, and then we get them back. So we know that they live a very long time, and these sharks have been known to eat reindeer, or if they were just scavenged. Okay, 7-gill sharks. 7-gills are pretty cool. 7-gills have a very different strategy than the last shark jaws that I was showing you. These jaws, instead of having to hold on to something that's swimming fast that you have to catch, these guys tend to eat things that have sunk to the bottom and are maybe even dead already. So they have some saw-like teeth. So instead of catching and grabbing, they hook on and twist. And you can see that in the adaptations of their teeth when I pass this around, that they're just trying to rip big chunks out of something. So what is that something? Could be other sharks, could be whales, could be seals, could be anything that is dead underneath the water, and they just want to bite. I don't think they're too picky. We have found a lot of things in their stomachs probably shouldn't be eaten. So the broad-nosed 7-gill sharks have been found from Willapa Bay, San Francisco, and as of last year, we tagged a 7-gill shark in Puget Sound. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that research here in just a few minutes. So 7-gills have a very interesting strategy that's different than a lot of sharks in that they hunt in packs. So they actually synchronize how they go about killing something as well, which takes a bit more intelligence to actually hunt something down and coordinate with your fellow sharks to kill large prey. And 6-gills. 6-gills are super cool. 6-gills are a deep water species, as are 7-gills. They're found off our coast super deep, but they come into Puget Sound to pup. We know that they come into this area and they have babies, and we don't know how long they stay, but we're gaining more information. So 6-gills, unfortunately, wash up on our beaches moderately regularly, maybe 2 or 3 a year. Sometimes it's more when conditions are exceptionally bad for them in Puget Sound. They have a very similar adaptation strategy in their jaws to 7-gills, and you can see that in the way that they have kind of saw-like teeth on the top. Also, these guys try to get the best genetic advantage that they can, as do a lot of sharks. So female sharks can mate with multiple males, and they can store the sperm, and they can sire pups that have different dads in the same liver. So it's pretty cool. This is a very, very big shark in general for our area, and divers in Puget Sound see them all the time. There's lots of pictures at Alki Beach of people out there with 6-gill sharks. And sometimes they get really, really big. So this was a mama that got stranded in a shallow bay just north of here. Well, kind of inland, South Sound, and then north. She kind of floundered around in the bay, came in on a king tide, we think, floundered around for a couple of days, got really, really hot, and then died. So we did a necropsy on her, and she had pupped, which is great, which hopefully her genetics are in the pool, and she can live on through her offspring, because temperatures for a shark that live at 8,000 feet, when they get too hot, they just can't survive.
8,000 feet, that's amazing.
Okay, and now your favorites. So I know there were questions about, well, what about white sharks? Yes, we do have white sharks off of Washington coast. This was Westport, and this is a picture from the 70s. So this picture makes me super happy and super sad all at the same time. The idea that we can go out and find these massive creatures off of our coast in the 70s, but I'm pretty sure that this shark was killed just to be killed. Which makes me sad, because why would you have a fish that can fit on a flatbed truck? What would you use it for? Because sharks tend to have a lot of urea in their skin and in their muscles, and it would take a little bit of processing to process the shark. I'm hoping that they used it for some good, that somebody ate it or got some nutritional value out of it. Let's go with that. But white sharks are here off of our Washington coast, happily living off the edge with not hurting anybody and just living their lives. Okay, So we think of sharks as predators, but sharks are actually also prey. They are prey to our seals and sea lions, to our lingcod, they're prey to our orcas, they're prey to our rockfish. So just as it's a whole system, it's also a cycle. So when they're babies, they have higher mortality because they're little and they can't escape, but as they get bigger, they become the dominant predator in the system. And humans are a huge predator of sharks. They eat each other. This guy likes to eat a lot of stuff. Okay, so let's talk about why they're important. So we know that they're predators, we know that they're prey, but sharks are an apex predator. And what that means is that they play a super important role in the ecosystem. And they do that by maintaining the species that are in that system below them. Let me tell you how they do that. They help remove the weak and the sick, as well as keeping a balance with the competitors, helping to ensure that there's a lot of species diversity. They also serve as an indicator for ocean health. You know that if you have a lot of sharks in your system, there's enough to eat, and that the system is working just fine. So as predators, what sharks tend to do is they shift their prey's spatial habitat. I don't know if people have been following the news, but this also happens with wolves. They did a big experiment in Yellowstone National Park where the wolves were pushing the elk and pushing the deer away from the rivers, right? So that they weren't breaking down the banks and changing those areas. So a lot more plants came back. And the same thing happens with these predators in the marine system. They push their prey around, and it alters their prey's feeding strategy so that fish don't stay in one space and eat all of the good stuff in that space. So when you have a predator in your system, it keeps things moving and it keeps it hiding during the day so that it allows diversity in the species and diversity in the diets of other species. And through these spatial controls, and if we have a lot of them in the system, they actually indirectly maintain other habitats like seagrass because it keeps other fish from utilizing those too much so that they can't recover. So sharks are super important for the ecosystem and super important for keeping everything in balance. They also are a part of our world, which is why I'm here, right? I work for an agency that manages and maintains fisheries and manages and maintains species. So we all try to have a larger shark fishery. People have fished for spiny dogfish. They were heavily fished in the 40s and 50s, and this was mostly for their livers, but now we have synthetic, so we don't need them as much. They were also fished for food. Dogfish are actually used in the UK as fish and chips quite frequently. In Washington, we have some harvests. It's about 1,000 metric tons on average from 2000 to 2019, and we still have a pretty small tribal fishery. But they are recreationally harvested in Puget Sound as well. So recreational harvesters can go out, take a spiny dogfish, bring it home, soak it in milk, and enjoy it as fish and chips in their own house. And apparently they're delicious. Anybody have it? Pretty good. Let's try it. We have also historically fished basking shark. They were taken for their livers, their meat, and their fins, and in fear, which is how a lot of sharks are also taken. Through the 40s through the 70s, and they were historically considered a huge nuisance in the Puget Sound and in BC. They get tangled up in nets, and people just thought that they were a pain. Thresher sharks, which is the long-tailed shark that I told you about, are now part of the highly migratory species complex. And highly migratory species is a group of fish that are managed by the Pacific Fisheries Management Council. Threshers, we had an experimental fishery on them in the 80s and 90s, but there were a lot of problems with it. So there was a lot of unwanted bycatch, like sea turtles and marine mammals. And now we actually have more shark species added to the HMS complex. And that includes blues, makos, and thresher sharks. And one of the problems with this is that when you have a commercial fishery, you often have a lot of bycatch. And sharks, because they're not really wanted and they can't be retained in some instances, they're often not reported, and they're often sometimes killed inadvertently from types of fishing that we have. So we need to be really careful with how these are managed, because even if you have a fishery, let's say a tuna fishery, you're still going to have mortality of sharks. And if you have very sensitive species to being pulled up, put on deck, and then released, we actually need to know how many sharks are killed every year in our commercial fisheries and in our recreational fisheries, so that we can make sure that we are not damaging this resource, because it's super important to the ecosystem. So we do have recreational hook and line, including groundfish and salmon fisheries, where they catch bycatch of sharks. And then we also have a lot of our salmon fisheries, purse seinks and gillnets. Anything that scrapes along the bottom is also going to have some bycatch in our sharks. So like I said earlier, bottom fish or groundfish, those all include all of our shark species. And we have Washington codes that protect them from certain types of harvest. They are an integral part of our ecosystem, and we need to manage them like they are part of it, because even though you're not allowed to retain it, you still may be catching it, and you still may impact those populations that are struggling. And we do unfortunately have a lot of struggling species. So dogs give birth, but they're pregnant for 2 years. So it's a very slow reproductive cycle, and if you take too many of them, you're going to knock down their population so that they can't recover. So they have been overfished historically, but now that we know more about them, we can try to not allow them to be overfished by closing fisheries, closing down commercial fisheries, and just allowing them to be recreationally caught, and then monitoring catch. We also have closure of the commercial fisheries within the Puget Sound to help eliminate some of the problems with overharvest. And nobody's been allowed to harvest a basking shark since the 70s. As of 2012, 6-gills, 7-gills, and threshers can't be retained in any of our recreational fisheries. 6-gills cannot be removed from the water or kept by commercial. And we are considering listing the taupe shark, which is this guy here, right now. So it's being petitioned for listing because people still fear sharks, and they're caught a lot in recreational and commercial fisheries, even though it is no danger except for to its prey, which are small fish. Okay, so how do we maintain and manage and monitor the populations of sharks in Washington? So I don't know if you know this about us, but Washington State has a lot of technology at its disposal. Up here, this yellow thing is called our CI. It's a remotely operated vehicle, which is tethered to our boat, and we send it all the way down to the bottom of Puget Sound, and we can collect video for any of the species that we see on the rock piles or along the bottom. We also have a trawl survey that happens every year. It's going to be happening in April, so that's coming up soon. And then we also have collaborations with other groups and agencies. So this is a longline survey that we do in coordination with NOAA and the IPHC group to look at halibut and look at yellow-eyed and other types of fish. And then we also have a coastal survey that tends to catch a lot of sharks in those surveys too. So we can get an idea of the populations and how they are looking by using some of this technology. So how this works is that a driver sits on a boat and watches a screen and drives a video game. So when those kids are sitting in front of a screen and you want them to get off so badly, maybe let them do it, because you can parlay that into a job as a marine biologist and use your video controller as you're watching TV. You don't even look out the window, and you are watching the bottom go by under the water. So it is pretty cool to do, and what I want to show you, it's going to take one brief second, because I want to show you what we see when we send this remotely operated vehicle down to the bottom. And I hope the sound doesn't work.
Wow.
So this is a survey that we do fairly regularly. This is in the San Juan Islands in October. And our ROV was dropped down to the bottom. The two green beams that you see on the top, those are lasers, so that we can get accurate measurements of fish that we come across. And when we dropped this ROV down to the bottom, we went through kind of a layer of smelt, or a layer of bait. And you can see little shrimp and krill are just having a great time. Lights probably confuse the shrimp as well and confuse the sharks. So we have technicians that review this video, and they have to count every single fish they see. And I'm just glad that I didn't have to review this video, because if you can tell me which ones you've seen multiple times, then you can come and work for us. So it's pretty cool when you can see that there are these large groups and these large schools of sharks that are thriving in Puget Sound, and we would like to keep it that way because they're very important to our system. Okay. Look at how smooth that was. Come on now. All right. So we also have other techniques available. We do trawl surveys. This is a more destructive survey, but it gives us abundance estimates of fish that we have in Puget Sound. Not only do we monitor sharks, this is a brown cat shark that was brought up in the trawl, and that poor gal is here.
Oh.
So she looks a little different in a jar, but we brought her up in the trawl. She was actually pregnant at the time, but she was already dead. Nothing I can do about that. But she is pretty amazing in her adaptations. I also could not take her jaw set out because she just fits in a jar, but it would be about this big. She eats clams and the tops of clams and other small invertebrates that are along the bottom floor, and she lives pretty deeply in Puget Sound. So these are the things that we find when we're on our trawls that nobody would know about. Nobody catches them on a hook and line. Very few people trawl. There's no commercial trawls left. So some of these species, we don't actually understand what's happening with them until we use some of the strategies that we have for monitoring fish abundance in Puget Sound. We also catch a lot of skates and rays and other animals that we look at their abundance. We measure them. We try and get everything overboard that can live and save. So this is one way that we're monitoring not only shark populations, but groundfish populations in Puget Sound. Another thing that we do is we track trends. So salmon sharks. Salmon sharks are super cool. And salmon sharks are very prevalent off our coast. They have a jaw set that looks, like this. And you'll notice that this one is a lot more brownish, reddish than the other sharks that I showed you before. And you'll notice when you hold it that its jaw set is a lot firmer than the other sharks that I sent around. So salmon sharks eat. Yay! Yes, they eat salmon. Yes, and other fish that swim relatively fast. They have an adaptation to hold on to those fast-swimming fish. And these sharks tend to wash up on our coast because they have the ability to regulate their own internal body temperature, which means they can go all the way up to Alaska following salmon runs, and then they head down to California to pup. So unfortunately, they can swim really fast as well. Here is a tail of a salmon shark, very torpedo-like. They are quick-moving. They look quite a bit like a white shark, but quite a bit smaller in general. They are a fairly cool fish, but they do tend to wash up on our coast. And the reason are baby salmon sharks, and they can't make it all the way up north, or they can't make it all the way back down south when they do their migrations along our coast. So we do have a lot washed up, but what we want to know is the mortality event, or is the shark that's dying, is it unusual? Because things die, right? We know that. We know that when you're little, you tend to die more regularly than when you're bigger, and you can adapt to different things, or you can wait longer for food because you have more storage. So we do get a lot of babies, but we also sometimes get a lot of adults. So if we can track these trends, then we can understand better what's happening in the system. And then if we need to change something in regulations, or we need to change something to ensure that their populations stay stable, we can do that. Another thing that we do is we sample sharks. So whenever a shark washes up dead, hopefully there's a lot of networks out there to know to contact Fish and Wildlife so that we can go out and grab those sharks, which is why we have all of these things for you to touch and learn from today. But it also gives us a lot of information about their biology, what they're eating, where they're going, how they're living. And it also gives us an idea about what their cause of death could be. So a lot of these sharks come into our lab. We open them up, and I don't know if you know this, but pretty much the whole internal cavity of a shark is filled with liver. This is another reason it's targeted, because the liver is really oily and fatty. It also helps them float. So cartilage is light, and the liver is light, and they don't have a lot of bones to weigh them down, which helps them swim, helps them stay neutrally buoyant in the water and swim really fast, because they don't have a swim bladder like a lot of fish do. So they have these really big livers, which fills up their body cavities, but the condition of their liver tells us, were they healthy, were they eating, what was their environment like? And then we can determine the cause of death. So this 6-gill that came around that was small is this girl. And she died of ingesting a surf perch ring from the coast. And it got stuck, like the hook got stuck in her stomach.
Oh.
And the weights that were in there bounced up and down until it eventually killed her.
Oh.
This guy here, this is a 6-gill shark, and that one was eaten by a orb. Things die. It's a circle of life. Things need to eat. But it's hard for us to know what's happening with this sometimes because they're made out of cartilage. This is an idea of what the backbone looks like and how we can use these potentially to look at rings to see how they grow. We're still working on that technology, but once we get it nailed down, I'm going to let you guys know. All right, so we do our surveys, we do monitoring for road washes up dead. And unfortunately, things are starting to wash up a bit more because we have a lot of changes in our system. We have warmer water in the Puget Sound. We have warmer water in the ocean in general. And we have more acidic water here in the Puget Sound. And a lot of the prey that these sharks are relying on and animals are relying on, they're moving in different ways and they're moving in different places. So some of the prey base for a lot of these sharks are moving poleward, and they're moving faster than the sharks are realizing that they're moving. Also, a lot of the sharks can't moderate their own body temperature, like a lot of their prey. Going to the 6-gill shark is this mama here, 14 foot long, that died and washed up on the beach because she got too hot. And getting too hot seems to be something that's not really great for sharks. They have a very slow rate of evolution. We know that they're 100 million years old, are related to the sharks that we have currently. Their habitats are shifting, and we have to be really careful with overfishing. Because if there's a lot of more stressors in the system, a lot more stressors in the environment, you can't take as many in a fishery to maintain the populations at a sustainable level. So here's an example of that. In September of 2022, I got called, maybe by one of you, from Gig Harbor, and they said, oh no, there's at least 100 dead dogfish near my house, right outside my house. And so we got our buckets and we got our bags and we said, okay, well, what's going on here? Is it a toxic algae plume? Did they eat something? Were they harvested by a boat or a harvester that dumped them? We want to know why. Why did all these fish die? So we get there and I did a survey. We did a count, and yes, there were over 100, but most of them seem to be female. So with this type of shark, there is a pretty much 50-50 balance from males to females, but a lot of these were females, and I thought, okay, well, that's unusual, but why? Well, unfortunately, I collected a lot of them and took them back to the lab, and a lot of these sharks were actually pregnant. So they had lots of babies that were still gestating, and probably a year out or more. But my point for this slide is, even though 100 fish died when they're pregnant, the reproductive potential of these fish is also lost. So not only did we lose 100 adults, but we lost their reproductive potential as well. When things get too hot, and the reason they died is they got too hot. They got stranded in a shallow water bay, got too hot, and they all died. I know it sounds really negative, but wait. We have science, right? And we also have research. So we have a lot of evidence that we have 7-gill sharks off of the coast. They're in Wilpa Bay. They're all out there doing their thing. But this last year, we got a tip from a recreational fisher that there were 7-gill sharks in a very specific area. So we got a boat together. We got researchers together, Oregon State University, NOAA, Department of Fish and Wildlife. We went out there and we caught these sharks. So this is a 7-gill shark that we caught last year. And we put an internal tag in it. And we also put an external tag in it. And we have receivers out all through the Puget Sound and out on the coast. So we have 2 current 7-gills tagged and 1 tope shark. And we can now track them to see how they're using the Puget Sound, where they're going, what is their connectivity to other populations of 7-gill sharks. We don't even know if they have been here this whole time, and we don't know. And maybe they've been using it for ages. But I do know that when we caught one of them, some seal lipper fin came out. So we know that they're eating something, right? And if this is a new predator that's coming into Puget Sound, what does that mean for the system here? What does that mean for salmon? What does that mean for seals? and everything else that comes into play in our ecosystem. So good stuff is to utilize Puget Sound to their advantage so that when other parts are not great for them, they can use Puget Sound and it will be great for them. Okay, so now this is where I'm going to get into the information that I want to give you. We have a lot of places and people and brains and science all working together to help sharks. We're considering listing taupe shark, also known as soup fin. We have a whole bunch of categories and ESA and different listings for different groups of sharks. So these are out there. We have conservation acts, management acts to help people understand how important these are in the system and try to keep their populations from getting too low. So with that, I want to say thank you so much for your attention and your time and for not getting blood on my samples. Nobody did, right? I really appreciate that, and I appreciate being able to come here and talk to you about my favorite group species. This is a thresher that washed up this last year in our Washington Conservation Corps group that went out to help do a necropsy on a super stinky fish. So with that, I would like to ask if there are any questions.
Yeah, first of all, I was the one that reported Crescent Creek dogfish die-off.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But my question is, if you have some of these sharks that are pregnant for 4 years, in any of those intervening years, are there any births, or is it just like once every 4 years?
Once every 2 years. So they're pregnant for 24 months. And it all depends on how many of the eggs inside the shark get fertilized. So with the shark babies that I showed you that we got from your report, there were actually balls of egg cells that hadn't been fertilized, and those actually become food for the sharks that are living inside the mom. So they only release those babies every 24 months.
Okay, thank you.
And can you salvage them whenever you catch some like that are only a year and a half gestated?
The babies?
Yeah.
No. Once the mom is gone, I have never been there with the instantaneous death of a mom to take a baby out. But I do know somebody reported a shark attack on a research vessel because the mom shark was dead and they stuck their hand in the innards and the baby shark bit them. So that was their shark attack. Hey, you take it where you can, right? If you're attacked by a shark, even if it's a baby still inside the mother's cavity. So yes, but I don't think it would survive very long. They're pretty fragile until they're ready to go.
Question.
Yeah.
Would you comment on increased pharmaceuticals or biotics in autopsies? Are you finding more stuff from the water?
So our group called T-Bios with Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife monitors all of the chemicals that are kind of coming into fish. And the primary fish that they are using is English sole. So they take a lot of samples from English sole and some salmonids, but we really don't have the funding to test sharks when they are washed up dead. So I'm not really sure what the pharmaceutical load would be for a lot of these sharks. We do take liver samples, brain samples, encephalitis, Calabria, and NOAA. And I recently sent off our salmon shark samples to them. I don't know what kind of metrics they're going to run on those tissues, but usually they're not for narcotics or anything like that. It's more presence of bacteria or a virus that would kill them. Yeah.
As the oceans warm, I mean, obviously that impacts the migration of sharks. Will these large predators come north as the waters warm?
That's a very good question. So at the beginning of last year in January, we set ourselves up really well for a La Nina, right? And the currents along our coast, we have a lot of upwelling. It brings the nutrients up from the really low, deep levels, brings up, and that's why we have such an abundant amount of wildlife and fish out on our coast. Well, we were set up for La Nina, and all of a sudden something weird happened. Instead of that upwelling that was supposed to happen, we had downwelling. So to answer a question of is climate change or are climates going to drive them north, some species probably yes. But I think the system is becoming very dynamic, and the things that we use to really understand the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, how the waters were going to move, what time of year the blooms were happening. I think a lot of those things are in flux right now, and I don't think we have a really solid grasp on what impacts are going to be to large predators. So, I'm sorry. Yeah.
With the long evolution of sharks, is there any indication that they have the ability to become more adaptable to warming waters, or be able to kind of go along with how the seas are changing?
I hope so. I think that they have shown resilience, being around for 420 million years to our currents of 100 million years. I do know that once a shark has a really full belly, they can just hang out for months on end and not need to eat. So maybe some of those strategies, if they get a good meal, they can wait it out, and they can wait out some of the fluctuations that we're seeing in the system. I hope so. I hope that they can outlive us. Yeah.
You mentioned that the prey fish species were shifting poleward faster than sharks were. If that's a temperature-driven relationship on, say, physiology and survival, why are sharks moving slower? And is it physiological, or is it the fact that they don't have a dispersive larval stage?
That's a very good question. They don't have a dispersive larval stage, right? So a lot of fish, they're I like to call them spray and praise. Like they give birth and then those eggs float in the upper water column and they move by the currents and they move by the tides. And if they settle out in a nice place, then they're happy. If they don't, then they're eaten by other things in the system, right? But sharks are pregnant, which means they have to give birth in an area, and those sharks are stuck in that area until they get enough energy to move somewhere else. And it's a very good question. I wish I had all of the answers, but I do know that sometimes, for example, we had the Humboldt squid year where Humboldt squid were up here and everybody was amazed, shocked. And it happened really quick, and then it turned cold and they all died, right? So I think a lot of these fish are moving with the currents, they're moving with the warmer waters, and those gradients between them up, and then it fluctuates back, and then everything dies. So they having the elasticity in their genetics, having the elasticity in their ability to cope with warmer or saltier or more acidic or colder waters, I hope that there's a lot, but a lot of these sharks can also go deep. And we know that the deeper water isn't as affected, although low DO, that's a problem, right? But they're not as affected of what's happening necessarily on the surface of the oceans. It's a good question. Yeah.
Are the salmon shark, are they picky on what salmon like the sun orchids are? Do they only choose one type?
Well, here, let me tell you this. So I had a group when we were doing an necropsy, and the shark was 10 feet long on the table. And I said, you, go ahead and grab the brain. We need the brain to see if it has encephalitis. We need to send it off to the lab. And so they're like, well, where is it? I'm like, just around here, just slice off the top and see. So this huge, enormous shark, she was like, is this it? It's about that big. And I said, yeah, that's the brain. So if your whole idea is to swim around and eat whatever you can find, they're not going to be too picky. They're just going to want to catch whatever they can catch. And they're not going to only eat salmon. They're not like our marine mammals that are very particular. I think they'll eat a can. They'll eat fishing lures. We actually have a bait box that's a plastic Tupperware container that's this big around that killed one of the sharks, the jaws that we passed around. So they don't care. They'll just eat them. Yeah, they like to eat things. Yeah, not too bright. Yeah.
Many of us walk the beaches, and if we see something that, where could we report what we've seen that should be looked at?
Now, we have a stranding network, and if you just Google WDFW, there's a lot of contact information there too. So if you just Google Washington Stranding Network, that goes to a certain person, and they know which person, whatever species has washed up on the beach, who to contact. So we like to track sort of unusual mortality events in the Hood Canal. There's been a lot of them because there's been a lot of situations where the dissolved oxygen has suffocated a lot of fish and then they wash up on the beaches. So we like to try and track those events so that we can get a better handle on when they're happening. And we've closed down a lot of fishing in that area because we know that low DO is a problem in the canal. So yes, and you can contact me directly. My information is back there, and I'm happy to take any calls for anything cool or unusual that's washed up on the shore.
And what specific details could we send along for helping?
Yeah, usually it's a GPS location. So a lot of phones, if you drop a pin, and then you can text it to us, and then we can send folks out to go to that pinpoint on a GPS location. If it's a shark, usually they're fairly big. If they're starting to rot, they're pretty stinky, so it's really easy to track those down. And a lot of times the homeowners will be there and they'll meet us and say, this is what we saw, this, you know, it was here and it washed away. But if there are sharks that wash up on your beaches, if you can in some way secure it so the next tide doesn't wash it away, it's really helpful for us so that we can get there, determine the cause of death and why.
Interested in sharks, or are there other animals that?
Well, things die a lot. So I guess it would have to be if it's super unusual. We have a lot of king of the salmon that have recently been washing up on the shore. They look like a really long eel with a really big sharp teeth mouth, and they're typically off of our coast. So we've been called quite often for a king of the salmon. But if you feel like this is something unusual that you haven't seen, yeah, give us a call. It's always good to track this information, and we have a weird sightings of the Puget Sound spreadsheet that we keep. So when mola mola or the sunfish come into Puget Sound, or the king of the salmon wash up, or something just weird happens, we can track it to see is it an anomaly or is this something that's changing in our system. Yeah.
Can you talk about the practice of shark finning and the impact on the worldwide shark population? I know it's a big topic, but and then if there are any occurrences of illegal shark finning that maybe you've encountered in Washington.
I haven't here, but I'm not really involved in enforcement. So I'm not really sure what enforcement has encountered. And I think when finning occurs, they're dumping the body, and a lot of times, unfortunately, it's still alive. It's just now can't swim anywhere and suffocates. A lot of the information that I showed you about additional resources are purely the United States rules for how we need to best manage our oceans. And a lot of other countries around the world have different ideas about how to best manage their waters that are close to their countries. So the worldwide agreement that all sharks are wonderful and shouldn't be killed and they should be preserved and their population should be kept whole, that it's not an agreement around the world. And there are hungry people. And so when people see food, they have decisions to make. So our country, we have the Magnuson-Stevens Act, where we have to manage fisheries in a certain way to not drive population levels too low. And a lot of other countries don't have those rules and regulations. So unfortunately, there are some practices that are happening that are not sustainable for fisheries, and our sharks move a long, long way. They go all the way to Alaska. They pass by other countries when they're going up and down. So, which is why we're tracking some of these so that we can see where they're going and how to best protect them. Yeah.
The seven gill, are they like keeping a presence here in the Puget Sound, or is it sort of like coming in, coming out? I was wondering if there's like evidence that they might help manage our pinniped population.
Right? I will tell you in 2 years. We had a meeting today about, we just got funded for 5 tags, and then we are getting a donation of possibly 30 tags. So we have 2 out. So the tags cost $500 a piece. And when you put them in the cavity of an animal and then you throw the animal back into the water and you say, good luck, we have 2, and they are moving around in the Puget Sound. I don't know if they came out because we only download the receivers every 6 months or every year. So we're waiting to download some of the receivers out on the outer coast to see if our sharks have been detected. But once we get more samples out there, we can see how the populations, and maybe it's just 2 or 5 sharks that came into this area and they thought, hey, here looks like a free lunch and I can handle these temperatures. So I will let you know. You keep in an animal doesn't exist in a place, and then they come into that place, and it's great because it just diversifies what habitats they're using so that we can help them keep those habitats strong and available for them in the future. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite shark or ocean life related?
Ocean life related show? Oh, joke. Yeah. What's a pirate's favorite letter? You think it's the R. harbor, but it's the sea they love. Yeah, I have to interpret one, so I can't. All right, well, I think my time is up.
Thank you.
Let's keep that applause going. That was fantastic. Thank you, Lisa. Well, hopefully this has wet your whistle a little bit for the love of sharks. All of these shark displays that we passed around are on exhibit at Harbor WildWatch, so I encourage you to stop by. Come on down and learn even more about these shark species. Our whole team has put a ton of hours into making this display possible, and we are so excited to share our love of sharks and some of this newfound knowledge that we've got from my friend Lisa here. So definitely swing by, tell your friends. It's very kid-friendly. We have some really great activities for our young students where they can actually tag a shark in the ways that Lisa was describing, with external and internal tags, and it's very, very fun. It's not a real shark. Don't be fooled. It's a stuffed shark. I had one little boy who was very, very scared of the very scary pointy end of the shark, and I had to shove him like, no, it's fine, and I just wrapped it up in a big old bear hug, which I kind of wish I could do to real sharks, but I don't think they would like it. So I will refrain. Also, if you are interested in supporting the work that Harbor WildWatch does, we do have a Steward Club, which is kind of the Cocktails and Fishtales aspect of this very fun event that we do came out of that Steward Club as a way to support our organization in the stewardship work that we do through education. And we have at the very back applications, the little form envelopes back there that our lovely interns or Lindsay or Stina or myself can help you. And it's a wonderful way for you to support our organization financially. So, how many of you are Steward Club members currently? Oh yeah, lots of you got the email to be here tonight because of that. So, woohoo. Look to those people who have their hands raised and ask them why are you a Steward Club. What else am I forgetting, Lindsay? I don't know. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Is the exhibit a permanent exhibit or?
The exhibit will run for roughly a year or so. We will see. So you have time. You don't rush in this week. It will be there. It will wait for you.
Rachel, what about the next Cocktails and Fishtales?
Oh, our next Cocktails and Fishtales. I have no idea. I got to get through today, and then I can look to the future. Howard, don't ask me questions I don't know the answer to. Okay. Big salute to our other board members who are here as well, because there are a handful of you, and a few popped in and popped right back out again. So thank you to our board members. I think it is time to give one last round of applause to Lisa. Thank her. And if you all for tuning in, or to get a closer look or take a selfie with some of these very cool things, don't put them over your head and don't get blood on them. But those artifacts are at the back and up front here. Thanks, everybody. Learn, have fun.